Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Boom Comic Source collaboration. Time for the DC Spotlight for the first week of June 2024. Not a huge week this week. There's a couple of reprints, there's a couple of homages, what have you. But overall, a pretty solid week. Definitely feels like we're ramping up to absolute power and heading toward the end of the House of Brainiac event. So, yeah, nothing blew me away this week, but nothing was terrible either. So, what are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
I'm gonna, I'm a little bit more, I'm a little bit more critical this week. There was only actually maybe one, maybe two that I actually really I thought were good. The rest were, I thought, very mediocre to me, and I was disappointed with them. But it happens, and there's definitely there's a couple where I'm gonna be curious to hear your thoughts on, and yeah, we'll have to. Lots to talk about this week, so be interested to hear your thoughts. So
Yeah, that's the thing about some of these books. Like, it's sort of like not much happened, kind of average book. I don't know that I'm going to have that many thoughts, but we'll see. I think I can kind of guess the ones. Like, if I had to guess three that you enjoyed, I think I go like Kneel Before Zod, uh, Batman, and probably Birds of Prey would probably be if I had to pick your top three. But we'll see how close I am. Anyway, we'll kick it off with Kneel Before Zod, number 6. I Know is the name of the issue, and I is spelled out EYE. Joe Casey's the writer, Dan McDade on art, David Barron on colors, Troy Petrie on letters. It's been interesting seeing Zod, the kind of the path that he's taken. It's sort of spoiled right on the cover, which is kind of annoying. Like the main cover, it says "Within the Eye of the Emerald Empress." So again, kind of spoiled. Obviously, we do spoilers here when we're talking about these books in depth. But in the issue, the way Joe Casey laid it out, there's this mysterious prisoner who's held like in the super max security part of the prison ship that he's taken over. And it's sort of a mystery who it is, and he's trying to figure out or what have you. But again, spoiled right on the cover. I don't know why they did that because the way that it played out, it was pretty interesting. And if I hadn't seen that on the cover, I would be wondering, well, who is this? Is this Doomsday down there? Like, who is this in the ship? But it turns out that it is Emerald Empress. And when she shows up, it's great art from Dan McDade, and it's a really interesting sort of reveal, even though it was spoiled. And, I know the Emerald Empress from Legion of Superheroes, so I'm not sure what she's doing so far back in time. I mean, I know she's been around for a long time, but as soon as she shows up on the page, I mean, here's a book, a title that started off with Zod having a wife and Zod having a kid. His wife is dead. His kid is gone. He says he doesn't have a family. There's when he's confronting Jor-El, who appears to be somewhat of a figment of his imagination, maybe the more reasonable part of him, let's say, that was trying to maybe take a greater amount of agency when he had the planet. I've talked about it a lot in terms of this title, especially when Ursa was nagging him. It's like, how much more does this guy have to do? Like, he was a bastard and he would make all these choices to get the thing being a world that could be christened New Krypton, and he could have peace and establish a new homeworld for his people. He did all that, so he can stop being a bastard now, right? And he can just be a little more laid back and not such a villain, so to speak. And I feel like this Jor-El that he's seeing is sort of that aspect, the more reasonable, rational aspect of himself, that now that New Krypton's gone, his wife is gone, his son is gone, that all goes out the window, right? So I say all that to say this: when I saw Emerald Empress show up, I immediately shipped her and Zod. I'm like, what, they don't necessarily have to fight. What if Emerald Empress is the new, I don't want to say wife, but the new partner for Zod? Like, them teamed up, both in a villainous way and a romantic way would be kind of interesting. Yeah. And they would also be a really it would be hard. It would be hard. That's a hard obstacle to overcome for any hero, to have to take on the Emerald Empress and Zod. So for those not familiar, Emerald Empress, she has this like floating eye that can shoot like concussive beams or what have you. She's very strong herself, the typical strength and vulnerability, reflexes, that sort of thing. So yeah, and she can control the eye, you know, telepathically, I guess you'd say, and she does have some other sort of telepathic powers as well. So she's very formidable. Zod formidable. It definitely seems like Zod. He's not necessarily trying to win the hearts and minds of these prisoners. He's controlling them through sheer strength of will and the fact that they have these collars, these inhibitor collars on them that are keeping them in check and keeping their powers in check and what have you. So he's not looking to again inspire. He's just looking to control. It really is, you know, you got to give credit to Joe Casey. He said he wanted to return the villainy to Zod. It's not only that he's kind of returned the villainy to Zod, but he's almost turned back the clock on the character in a way. There are times where that doesn't work well. You know, we've talked about going backwards with Damian Wayne and some other characters where it's like, man, you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Casey hasn't done that. I give him a lot of credit. Like he's brought the kind of the classic feel of Zod being a villain and feeling very megalomaniacal, very evil, for lack of a better term. He's kept the trauma that Zod's gone through recently and the history that Zod's gone through as far as, being the ruler of New Krypton, having a wife, having a son, what have you. But he's gotten rid of that baggage. And for Zod, it works, right? Like I complained about it when Bendis did it with Superman, sent John off into space. Lois was off on some, mystery investigation, whatever, because Bendis, it seemed like, to me at least, he just wanted to write a solo Superman story. Casey's not doing that. He's returning Zod back to basics, so to speak. So I think it really works. The Dan McDade art is fantastic. I'm really intrigued to see where this goes. I'm kind of sad that this is, I think it's 7 issues. So I think there's only 1 issue left. I'm going to double check on that. But man, I want this to keep going. Casey's done such a fantastic job with this series. It kind of feels like we're just getting started. Like I said, you tear somebody down to build them back up. Zod is just being built back up. I mean, he's healing from the damage that his body took, being burned and all that. So yeah, there's 2 issues left actually. So issue 7 and 8. I hope that Casey can get to where he wants to be or needs to be by the end of that. But man, I'd like maybe 4 more issues. But anyway, it's been a really good series. It has impressed me. It's exceeded my expectations. So what are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
Well, it's interesting that this issue starts off with, I'm not sure if this is, you want to talk about Zod being evil. I think it starts off with Zod having just had sex with a Tamaranian prisoner who, it's questionable, I suppose, was it by consent? Or maybe she didn't have much of a choice. She's leaving his bed chambers. He tells her to get out. And then the voice of Jor-El calls him a Tamaranian surf conqueror. So predictable. So Zod is drowning his sorrows over the loss of his wife by sleeping with a Tamaranian prisoner who doesn't seem to mind that it's happened. So I guess it is consensual, but it seems that at odds with the fact that he's taken over the ship and maybe the prisoner. I mean, it's interesting. I sort of like that Joe Casey did that because it hints at either how far gone is Zod? How did he treat this woman? While at the same time, it says something, she's a prisoner. Maybe she did that and she's doing that for her own survival to seduce the guy who's taken over the ship, this Kryptonian conqueror or would-be conqueror. So I sort of like that. Joe Casey is sort of leaving it up to us readers to sort of like infer what we want from that scene. So I sort of like that, sort of in keeping with this whole idea of showing that this is a different Zod now. He's this is Zod's manner of coping with the loss of his wife. He's taken over this prisoner ship. Now he's slept with another woman. Is he directionless? Does he have a plan? Well, it looks as if he's told the ship. He gets a tour of the ship. He finds out that there's another prisoner on the ship, or a number of other prisoners on the ship that are in high security. And one of them, of course, ends up being the Emerald Empress. And then, of course, he also gives a command that this prison ship that he's on is actually orbiting the outskirts of the galaxy for a very obvious reason, that it's a prison ship, and probably in case of a prison break, at least the prisoners are as far away from other galactic civilizations as possible, to probably allow for their capture if they were to escape before they could arrive at any civilized or populated world. But in any event, it's clear here that we're watching the evolution of Zod's character. Where is it going to go? We're not sure. The Emerald Empress, I think she's a member of the Fatal Five or the Fearsome Five in the Legion of Superheroes. My God, it's been such a...
Yeah, Fatal Five. Fearsome Five is the Titans.
Right. But Fatal Five, but it's... she's a cool character. I'm trying to remember her characterization. It's been such a long time since I read a Legion of Superheroes with the Fatal Five in it. How similar to Ursa is the Emerald Empress? How, will she be of similar disposition? It would seem to me that, while they might battle each other, it would seem to me that, the Emerald Empress probably has the same type of mindset, the conquering mindset, as Zod has now. So it's interesting. I personally hope they get together, or at least have an exceptionally, I want them to have at least an equally dysfunctional relationship as he had with Ursa. And in particular, it'll throw more a wrench into things, given his dysfunctional relationship with Lord Zod, his own son, because Zod has said in this issue, he's reiterated the fact that he feels alone, that he doesn't have a family. So he's pretty much given up on his son, which I find almost a little bit extraordinary, only because Zod almost wore it like a badge of honor that he was sending Lord-Zod out on his own as sort of like a rite of passage to find his own way, to find his own way and become a man, just like his father made him do the same thing. And he did so, and Lord-Zod, I guess, ultimately betrayed them by revealing these weapons that were on New Kandor. But I'm surprised he hasn't given his son the benefit of the doubt. And but maybe that will come in time as the story progresses. You mentioned that there's only 2 issues left. It's unfortunate. I don't think there's no way that this is going to be resolved in the next 2 issues. My guess, it's probably going to resolve with some sort of probably some new status quo for General Zod moving forward, and maybe the Emerald Empress will be part of that new status quo or not. But quite frankly, since DC doesn't have a Legion of Superheroes anymore, and when they did have it, it was under Bendis, and frankly not particularly intriguing, you might as well do something with this fantastic character, Emerald Empress, who is probably one of the more interesting characters in the 31st century. To have her used like this, the potential here is extraordinary. And frankly, I find her more interesting than Ursa anyway. So this actually does capture my interest, and I actually like it. You're right. There's been a lot of twists and turns in this series, and I think that's a good thing. This issue did intrigue me. This issue did intrigue me, and I really like seeing that eye on the cover. Although I agree with you, it does sort of give it away. But I nonetheless really, really like the cover with that emerald eye behind a very pissed off Zod. It's pretty good. But overall, yeah, I actually enjoyed this issue.
Yeah, that should have been the cover for next. After the reveal, should have been the cover for next issue. But anyway, yeah, it's been really good. I'd love to see it continue. Give these guys a break for a few months. Maybe bring it back in the summer and fall. It'd be fantastic. Yeah. Anyway, up next, we have Suicide Squad Kill Arkham Asylum, Chapter 5, Only the Strong, written by John Layman, art by Jesus Arbas, colors by David Barron, letters by Anworld Design. So this is the final issue that leads into the Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League event, or not event, but video game, rather. So this kind of explains it. It's the first half is sort of focused on King Shark. And then it sort of explains what exactly Waller is trying to do. She basically set it up, for lack of a better term, for these prisoners all to be released and basically fight amongst themselves. And then she's going to take the top 4, the 4 survivors. She's going to inject their heads with the bomb. She's going to turn them into Task Force X. She's going to send them after the Justice League. So it's an interesting prelude, as it were, because if you're looking for the ending of this story, you got to go play the video game. And if you're like me and you don't play video games, then you're just kind of left to your own devices, I guess. Probably can go watch a YouTube video or something on the storyline behind the actual video game. But I'm certainly not going to go start playing the video game just because I didn't get the ending here. It's almost like it ends at the beginning of the next chapter, which would be that Suicide Squad versus Justice League. So this was fun. It was entertaining. Like I've said a lot of times, if you play those Rocksteady video games, you're probably getting a lot more out of this than those of us that don't play the video games, and that's perfectly fine. The only thing that took me out of the story, as it has throughout and continues to do so, is the depiction of Amanda Waller as this thin man. She's drawn like a man. She looks like a man. She's thin. It doesn't look like any version of Amanda Waller I've ever seen. I don't like it. It just really looks bad. I don't know what else to say, which is really strange because everybody else looks very recognizable. Clearly it's Captain Boomerang. Clearly it's Harley Quinn. Clearly it's King Shark. So I don't know what's up with Amanda Waller looking the way that she did. And I'm not blaming the artist at all. Maybe those were the notes that he got. Maybe that's how she looks in the video game. I don't know. It just looks really strange. But overall, I really appreciated this. It's clear John Layman knows how to depict these characters accurately in terms of characterization and what have you. And it does make me want to know what the rest of the story is, but not enough to go. I mean, I don't even own a video game system. It's not like this would be an easy thing for me to go out and do. Not to mention, I have zero time to play a video game. So anyway, overall, I thought this was fun. And if it does bring some people in, some crossover, people that play the video game that read this and then start reading comics, great. I don't know that's going to go too much the other way. People reading comics are going to start playing video games based on this. I just kind of don't see that happening. Totally different barrier to entry there. But anyway, what were your thoughts on this, Rock?
Well, it's every issue is focused on a different member of the Suicide Squad that would ultimately form the team. This series is called Kill Arkham Asylum because Amanda Waller, through the process of this prequel to the video game, which is called Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, this was all about her selecting the finest, most able warriors that are the most able soldiers in Arkham Asylum, and Killer Shark, Harley Quinn, Captain Boomerang, and Deadshot are the 4 survivors, and they form the team, and she sends them off, and that's where the video game starts. And it does have some hints here, and it talks about what the threat is, that the Justice League have become evil. That is shown. You should be happy. I was happy. I'll freely admit. We got to watch Killer Shark actually eat a Clayface version of Amanda Waller. So even though Amanda Waller won't, in fact, probably she won't die in absolute power because DC has this thing against not actually, have nothing has any consequence anymore. But at least in this issue, there's a little bit of a well-deserved death, even if it is of a Clayface version of Amanda Waller. I enjoyed seeing that. But at the end of the day, of course, Amanda Waller still wins because she forms her team, and that's just the way it is. I found myself actually wanting very much. I was looking forward to the confrontation between Deadshot and Deathstroke in this series because of what Deathstroke did to Deadshot in the second or third issue. But then I realized, well, that's what happens in the video game, I'm sure. And so a lot of the plot points that I was really interested to get resolved obviously would take place in the video game. And, well, that's a good reason for me to go play the video game. I don't play the video game, but I can probably just Google it, and I'm sure they play out the video scenes on YouTube. I've watched some of it, but that particular scene, I don't know if they have a final battle between Deadshot and Deathstroke in the video game. I'm assuming they do. But overall, I thought John Layman did a really good job here. And maybe one of the reasons why Amanda Waller looks so different in this series than in the other series is that DC didn't want to cause confusion to Amanda Waller in the Absolute Power series. Although I will add that this is more akin to how Amanda Waller looks in the video game as well. So in any event, I thought that this was actually a decent series. I thought John Layman did a pretty good job. So I enjoyed how this wrapped up. There's some dangling plot points, but I understand given the nature of the comic itself being a prequel.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. You got to just realize it's not in continuity. It's a video game tie-in, and it's going to be kind of its own thing. So, all right, up next we have The Boy Wonder #2, written and drawn by Juni Ba, colors by Chris O'Halloran, letters by Aditya Bidikar. This is a Black Label book. It's clearly its own thing. Very heavy Asian influences, especially when it comes to the art. Um, I gotta admit that I don't think I'm the audience for this book, and I'm not really clear what the point is of it, to be honest. So the first one was very focused. First issue was very focused on Damian. This one kind of shifts the focus a little bit to Red Hood for the first, I'd say at least half the issue. It's focused on Red Hood. You know, this version of Red Hood being still kind of disillusioned and almost the outcast of the black sheep of the Bat family. And then he does have Damian show up later to help go out and do something that wasn't 100% clear to me. But they end up confronting this demon, is what they call him. The guy clearly knows a lot about them. It's not too long before this demon, pretty easily, to be honest, defeats them both and then says, I'll see you guys later, and takes off. Doesn't, finish the job, as it were. So what exactly he's waiting for, what exactly his purpose is, we don't know, other than his name is Rock, R-O-K. So again, what's the point of this series? I'm just not sure. Is it to kind of establish what Damian's relationship is to other members of the Bat family? It seems like maybe it's going that direction, but in a very sort of meandering way. So I'm not a huge fan of the art style. And maybe that's why this is not really holding my interest. But it might be another situation where I'll get more out of it once I have the whole story and understand better what the point of it is. Because right now, 2 issues in, I have no idea what the point of this is. And when the art doesn't particularly draw me in, I end up feeling like, so why am I reading this? Well, because I'm going to give my thoughts on it in a review. But other than that, this is not something I would ever read if it wasn't for the fact that, we're covering it to let everybody know our thoughts. This is just not for me. Not my type of art style, not my type of storytelling. But again, I'm holding final judgment until I read the whole story, because it might come together in the end. But for me right now, it's I'm just not enjoying it. It's just, there's nothing about it that hooks me, and I'm not saying that it has to be my style of art to hook me, because if the story's really good, within a page or two, I can get sucked in and I sort of forget that maybe the art style is not my favorite type of art style, or not the art style that I prefer. But we're 2 issues in, and this is only a 4-issue series, and I don't know what the point of it is yet. And again, that can be okay halfway in if I have really great art that pulls me in, or I can have a really good story that pulls me in, and it can, make up for it, because the whole story, all 4 issues, add up to more than the sum of the parts. But I've got neither here. I don't have a story that's compelling, because I don't really understand what's going on. I don't really understand the point of the story, and the art's not drawing me in either. So I'm sort of left thinking, man, we're halfway through, and I don't know what's happening. I mean, I know what's happening in terms of the individual events. I can describe those, but what is the point of all this? I don't know. Kind of like an episode of Seinfeld. It's a show about nothing. There's just all these events happening to Damian and happening to Red Hood, and they're just happening. They don't appear to tie in together or have anything to do with any of the other events. So why do I care? And I guess that's really the failing that I'm struggling with. What do I care about these versions of these particular characters? Why do I care about these events? I feel like I haven't been given a reason to care. I have no context for the event. So yeah, to me, it's just not working so far. So I don't know. Maybe you had a different experience, Rocky. What do you think?
No, I did. I didn't have a different experience. I would phrase my criticism differently, and that's I know what the point is, and I know you know what the point is. But we've read this story before. This is about Damian and Jason Todd talking about their demons to each other, because they actually have a lot in common. They've got some commonalities in their background. They both have basically, Jason, their father is Bruce Wayne. And Jason Todd has different types of dysfunction in his relationship with Bruce Wayne, with Batman, and Damian has his own type. In other words, they both are denying their demons inside, and that's what this demon named Rock, R-O-K, as you said, is trying to tell them, is bragging about. He's going to expose their demons. Well, so what? I mean, It doesn't even look like he's out to hurt them. So I just, again, that's why. So that's the point of the story. But we've heard this story before. The art. The art, I think, it's very stylistic, so it might be for some people. I will say the covers are very stylistic. Like, the art is eye-catching. Artistically, I think the covers are cool, and even the page layouts and the colors and the bright colors. Chris O'Halloran's colors are really good, and Juni Ba, his/her, I'm not sure what gender her is, but the art is consistent throughout, and but I find that sometimes the backgrounds are non-existent, and then other times the backgrounds are amazing. I mean, sometimes the backgrounds look really, really good. There's a lot of detail, and then at other times there's very little background. And so, but I think it reminds me a little bit of what is that samurai cartoon? Bastards, is it Bastard Samurai?
Samurai
in India. What's that?
Samurai Jack?
Samurai Jack, yeah. Artistically, the art reminds me, has sort of a little bit of a Samurai Jack feel to me, which I don't mind. I like that cartoon, but I just don't. This story just doesn't appeal to me at all, because it's not. I've got no interest in knowing where this might be going, and this demon character is really not interesting, and it hints at a larger villain who I could care less about, and that's the sad part. And I still maintain my earlier criticism. I mean, I don't know why this is Black Label. I really, but I guess it's just different and it's out of continuity, like you said. But I just think that this is a miss for me. But it might have its audience out there. But it's this is not. I'm not a member of the audience for this comic either.
Yeah, and your point's taken. Like, this could be very well be a story about how alike Damian and Jason are, even though they might not necessarily see it. Or not. That could have just been this issue. Because, so the first issue is focused on Damian. Second issue, we bring in Jason Todd. For all we know, the third issue is going to be they bring in Dick Grayson or Tim Drake, and it's a comparison of Damian and Dick, or Damian and Jason. Like, I don't know yet, which is kind of the point. There's only 2 issues to go, and we don't actually know. So you very well may be right. It's going to explore the similarities and differences between Damian and Jason in more depth as it goes along, or they're going to bring in another member of the Bat family. Again, we're halfway through and we don't know. I think that's not the best way to tell a story in my mind. So anyway, let's move on. Next up, we have My Adventures with Superman #1, The Ones Who Fell to Earth, Part 1. Excuse me. This is written by Josie Campbell. Art is by Pablo M. Collar. Nick Filardi on colors, letters by Lucas Gattoni. Now, for those of you who may not have listened to my interview with Josie a few weeks ago, this is basically the bridge series between season 1 of My Adventures of Superman and season 2 of My Adventures with Superman. It's a really great cartoon. It's sort of a different version of Superman and Lois and Jimmy, sort of a modernized version. One of the things that I love about the series, the animated series, which comes on Toonami, and then after it appears or premieres on Toonami, the following day it's available on the Max streaming service. But one of the things I loved about it was, we're always told how smart Lois is. And it always bugs me that she couldn't figure out that Clark was Superman. In the first season of My Adventures with Superman, she figures out pretty quickly that Superman and Clark are one and the same, as an intelligent person would. And we're told Lois is very intelligent. So I loved that. I loved that about, it's probably one of my favorite things about the series. But it is kind of faithful to the feel of hope and, the inspiration that Superman is and what have you. I love the version of Jimmy. I love Lois. So I really was a big fan of the cartoon. And, in the interest of full disclosure, the only reason I made time to watch it was because I was interviewing Josie. So I'm like, man, I got to go watch this so I know what I'm talking about. So again, the second season's going to pick up a little bit later in the year because the last episode of the first season takes place on Thanksgiving, over Thanksgiving at the Clark or the Kent farm, right? And then the first issue of the first episode of season 2 takes place after the new year. So Josie said that they wish that they would have had time to do a Christmas episode. And if they had time to do a Christmas episode, this story that's being told in this series is what the Christmas episode would have been. So again, if you're a fan of the series, if you're curious what's happening between season 1 and season 2, this is going to give you more context for that. It feels very faithful to the animated series. It's only 3 issues, and if you don't necessarily have to have read the animated series to understand what's going on here, the art is fantastic. It's very similar to the style of animation on the show, and you're told everything you need to know just by reading this issue. But if you have read the issue, there are things that happen in this series, or I should say, if you have watched the series, the animated series, there are things that happen in this issue that you're going to be like, oh, that's from this episode, or that's from that episode, or I remember when Clark was fighting this or that or whatever, and you're going to see call outs, right? Because there's a scene in here where there's workmen that are repairing some damage to the city from one of the fights that Superman had in the first season of the animated series and what have you. So, written by Josie, who's heavily involved with the show. She's written episodes of the show. She's a producer on the show. So again, if you're a fan of the animated series, you're going to love this. Highly encourage you to pick it up. And I'm always a sucker for Christmas episodes. So it is a little strange, I will admit, to have a 3-issue series come out that's set at Christmas time, coming out this time of year. I mean, Phoenix, we're hitting like 111 this weekend. So I guess good thing you came out 2 weeks ago, Rocky, before all the heat really hit. But yeah, again, this is coming out now because the season 2 just debuted. So this will bridge the gap, and I do recommend it. So what are your thoughts on it?
Well, here's the thing. I didn't watch I've only watched YouTube excerpts of this Superman cartoon, of My Adventures with Superman. And the YouTube excerpts that I've watched are all like focused more on the plot and some of the kissy stuff between Lois and Clark / Superman, right? And so it's all right. And actually the plot sequences and some of the actual plot sequences and the stories itself, what I'm watching in 5-minute increments, well, it looked pretty good. It looked pretty good. I don't even mind the style of animation. So, but I will say that I'm old school. I'm not a big fan of the setup itself, but I can recognize that this is a popular show, and this is true to form. Having been unfamiliar with the collective whole of season 1, first thing that threw me off, and this is an unfair because it says right, this is between season 1 and season 2. I don't know why Superman can't make it home for Christmas because his parents told him that they're going to be busy doing farm work over Christmas. I mean, come on. That didn't make any sense. But, and apparently Lois...
there was a big, huge battle at the farm during Thanksgiving. So when they say like the house was, damaged and yeah, it makes more sense if you've seen the show. But I also take your point. Like he's Superman. Why doesn't he go home and
he's not going to help the damage to his own house? But anyways, again, that's a nitpick. I just thought it was sort of funny. Both Lois and Jimmy know his secret identity. I didn't know that. That's interesting. I was shocked to discover that Steve Lombard, I'm assuming that Steve Lombard can't remember Lois's name or even Clark's name in the one scene. That seems really odd, but I guess it shows how stupid Steve Lombard is. It also suggests that the Daily Planet staff think that they think of Clark Kent as the baby reporter, and he's seems to be the subject of ridicule of other people on the floor, and just the way that he is portrayed. I don't know. I'd have to watch I can only hope it's better on the cartoon. It must be, because I got the impression reading this that Clark. I was immediately annoyed when he was beyond meek and mild. He's really comes across as really kind of annoying, the guy that keeps talking and he's interfering, and that has to be intentional behavior on his part. And I just thought it was a little bit. I didn't quite. It's just odd to me. But in any event, the story's good. the story's good, and aside from some annoyances which have nothing to do with the quality of this story, I I enjoyed it. It's a decent enough story. It's about I had to read between the lines, but there's enough there that my curiosity is piqued that if I want to go check out the season one, I would. So because it sort of whets my appetite a little bit, and yeah, I think the art's really good. And Nick Filardi on colors is pretty good. Pablo M. Collar is pretty good on the art. I'm really curious as to. I mean, Deathstroke, the Terminator, shows up. There's something going on between Checkmate and the U.S. military. Maybe that's in season 1 too, and will be in season 2. I'm not sure, but again, there's enough here to sort of whet my appetite in terms of what's going forward. Superman may have made a mistake, not helping or letting the U.S. military take this person who was in an Ivo suit. At the end of the issue, to take him away and incarcerate him. And it did a good job of showing Superman's compassion and willingness not to hurt somebody and not use aggressive force. He only uses it if he absolutely has to. I thought this was a Superman worth reading about and worth looking up to. As Superman, I've always preferred John Byrne's interpretation of Clark Kent, being a little bit more on the macho side, meek and mild on the macho sense. But this is for a new generation of watchers, and I'm, hey man, anything that brings more people into comic books, I really hope that a lot of the fans of season 1 will pick up this comic, because from what you're telling me, if it's that beholden to it, it deserves to have an audience.
Yeah, it's very beholden to it, and as far as them treating Clark like a kid, I mean, he is. I mean, Lois and Clark and Jimmy are about 19 years old in this. So
Okay.
they start out, they're not even reporters when the season first starts. They're just interns. They're supposed to be fetching coffee and making copies and that sort of thing. As far as Steve Lombard not knowing anybody's name, yes, Lois just started. He's not going to know an intern's name. Plus, it's a thing, right? That he does in the cartoon where he doesn't know anybody's name. He knows no one's name because he doesn't care. He's so full of himself. Why should he bother to learn anybody's name? So he just has nicknames for everybody. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and the other part about this, I talked to Josie about it. So you're going to see familiar names and familiar characters, but in a completely different way, right? Like Professor Ivo, right? He shows up and he's almost like this stand-in for Lex Luthor in the first season, but yet he puts on like a parasite suit. So it's almost like, in a way, that this version of Professor Ivo's got a little bit of Lex Luthor, a little bit of Professor Ivo, a little bit of Parasite, all thrown into a blender, mixed up to create this kind of brand new arch villain for Superman. And the other thing that they did really, really well is this idea of Checkmate as this clandestine organization that Livewire works for, that Deathstroke works for, that may have some ties to the U.S. government, may not, but then you have the U.S. military as well. So it's a completely different take on the mythos of Superman. And I have to admit, like when I was first watching it, first episode, I was like, I don't know, that's just so different than the history that I'm used to or whatever. But it's just done so well. The quality is so high. You just take it for this is just a different version, this different part of the multiverse where things just happen differently. And then it's kind of fun, right? Because what it does is it keeps the feel, like I said, the inspirational feel of Superman, the hope of Superman. It keeps that part of it, but it makes it fresh and new. Like, I don't know what to expect. Like when Lex Luthor does show up, how is he going to be different? When Toymaker or Silver Banshee or these classic Superman villains, when they show up, who are they going to be? Are they going to be a mashup of two characters? Are they going to be a new version or what have you? So it's something exciting. It's not just like, okay, here's the comic stories I know already, just in animated form. And then, how much, how can you be surprised if that's the case? So yeah, you'll definitely get a lot more out of this if you've watched the cartoon, everybody. So, all right, let's move on. Up next, we have Shazam number 12. Moving day finale. Josie Campbell's the writer, Mike Norton and Emanuela Lupacchino on art, Trish Mulvihill on colors, Troy Pucci on letters. So we find out that Shazam and Billy Batson are now two separate people, two separate entities, which I think you hinted at last issue or a couple issues ago, Rocky, that you thought that was the way it was heading. Turns out you're right. Give us your thoughts on this.
I thought it was a little bit by the numbers, somewhat kind of predictable. I'm well, this particular issue is called Moving Day, and we know that Shazam is keeping a secret, and he hasn't told Billy Batson, and really what the secret is revealed to be is that he won't tell Billy Batson something for reasons which really make no sense, but because later on Shazam tells everyone else except Billy, and that is something. I'll just come out and say it. The writing here, I think was suspect, because I think Josie Campbell here just fumbled the ball on this, because Shazam doesn't tell Billy Batson something that he ought to know, and that is the fact that he's not only connected to the Rock of Eternity, but it responds to his emotional state. And if Billy's going to find out that something, and I think the secret that Shazam is trying to keep from Billy, which is totally stupid, because he's not going to be able to keep it from Billy. Inevitably, Billy's going to find out, is that he's got a stepbrother, and that his mom has had another son, or his mother maybe adopted another son. That's the big reveal, and this is sort of making literally a mountain out of a molehill, but we won't call it a mountain out of a molehill. It's the Rock of Eternity out of a molehill. And then to sort of like elevate the circumstances to make it bigger than it really is, the Rock of Eternity, for whatever reason, is leaking into various dimensions. And because first we were told the Rock of Eternity was inside the orphan. It was a room inside the house. And now the Rock of Eternity, then we were told it was inside Billy. Then it was inside the house. Now I guess it's back inside Billy, and it's influenced by Billy's emotions. And Billy's now going to decide to. Billy gets very angry, and when he gets upset, it's going to cause the Rock of Eternity to leak more into other dimensions, and of course cause a major problem. And Shazam, I don't understand. Shazam, for a character who possesses the wisdom of Solomon, he decides to keep this from Billy, and to not be truthful with him, because when at some point Billy and Shazam end up both at the Rock of Eternity, sort of talking to each other, and I'm not even sure how that is when I come to think of it. They shouldn't be existing in the same. They shouldn't be. Somehow they're talking to each other, but when one of them is not, when Billy is Shazam, Billy is in the Rock of Eternity, and then when Shazam is in our world, then Billy's in the Rock of Eternity, I think, or somewhere within himself. I don't know. I'm still a little bit confused by that, to be honest with you. It seems, it just seems sort of. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to. I'm not really particularly excited about this, to be honest. The whole idea of the Shazvan, well, okay, we got the Rock of Eternity. Maybe the Rock of Eternity is in the Shazam van that they're all driving around in. I'm not really finding this particularly exciting. But I guess Billy is going to come to terms with the fact that he's got a stepbrother, and even if the Rock of Eternity is leaking and it's tied to Billy's emotional state, well, there would have been plenty of. Again, I'm still a little bit. I'm not sure where this is coming from. I guess we need more information, but I just thought Shazam wasn't. The way Shazam approached this wasn't particularly bright. The way that the way that he confronts Billy, he says that Billy should never have been chosen because he was a child, and Shazam's being very protective of Billy, and so there's no longer the dichotomy that was Billy Batson and Shazam is now. It feels very different. They are two fundamentally very different beings. Shazam is fundamentally his own consciousness, different from Billy. With an opinion of Billy that Billy is a child and Shazam is an adult. So the whole dynamic is clearly now changing, or at least from what I originally thought it was, and that's all well and good. But I'm not sure how I feel about this new where this new status quo that we're getting to. It might be good. It might be good, but it's to me it's I don't like this Rock of Eternity being tied to Billy Batson. I just don't like it. Keep it separate. The Rock of Eternity is separate. The Rock of Eternity is a central part of the DC universe. Do not connect it to with the consciousness or the soul of Billy Batson or Shazam. I think that's just silly, and it doesn't work. And I just don't like the plot. I don't like the story. But that's a little unfair. Is the story well written? Yes. Is the dialogue good? Yes. Is it clear what's happening? Yes. I'm just not a fan of the story itself. But we shall see. We'll see how Josie Campbell wraps it up. But I wasn't a big fan of this of just the plot this week on this, and I don't feel I like where it's going. But maybe you feel different.
I'm not sure that I do. I mean, you're the one that was like, I think they're separate people. And I got to be honest, I didn't even entertain the thought that that was going to be the case because it's never been the case. And here's the problem with it, right? Here's a character that's been around since the Golden Age. It's always been, it's only a physical metamorphosis. It's only a physical change, right? He's a kid. Very much wish fulfillment, right? It's part of the reason that the Shazam comic was so successful, why it outsold Superman for decades when it was coming out, because it's every kid's, wish come true. Hey, not only am I going to have all these superpowers, I'm going to be a grown-up, I'm going to be able to do whatever I want to do. No one's going to be able to tell me what to do like I'm a kid, because I'm going to be this grown-up, and I'm going to be the most powerful of grown-ups because I have all these superpowers. Still the same person. It's only a physical change. So here's the problem, as I see it. Now they're separate entities, separate people, separate personalities, separate consciousness, whatever word you want to use, for a character that's been around for a really, really long time. I have zero context, zero touch point, zero anything to understand who a separate Shazam is, a separate Captain Marvel. I got nothing because he's never been. He's never been separate. So I don't know. Like you're saying, well, I think it was a dumb mistake for him to, keep this from Billy, and he's talking about wanting to prevent Billy from doing harm to the world, and that's what he's telling all the other members of Billy's adoptive family. I was trying to protect Billy from himself, blah 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 blah. And you're like, that's not something Captain Marvel would do. Oh, wait, maybe it is. I don't know, because I don't know this guy. He's brand new, without any sort of characterization, without any context. Like, I got nothing, because he's never existed before. He's never existed as a separate entity until this comic. So it's problematic to take a character who's been around as long as Shazam has, as long as Captain Marvel has, and make this fundamental change. Like, this is a huge change to the status quo of the character.
Well, remember in Future State, we did have technically a separation between Shazam and Billy, right? Because Billy was guarding Shazam was guarding the gates to the Rock of Eternity,
Yes, but that felt more like it. It would be the same as if Superman traveled to another DC, another parallel universe, and there's two of them. That's what it felt like to me. In Future State, one of them was, the Billy Captain Marvel version, older, and one was from the past, but it was still the same. This is not that. This is what I was reminded of, and maybe I'm showing my age here, is back in the day when Captain Marvel and Rick Jones were sort of linked with the negabands, the wristbands that Captain Marvel used to wear that increased his power. And one of them was stuck in the negative zone, and one of them was on, the regular Marvel universe, Earth or space or whatever. And they'd bang the negabands together, and they would switch places. And they could, when whoever was in the negative zone could see through the eyes of the person that was, in regular reality, and was aware of what was going on and what have you. And he could sort of speak in the mind of the person that was in the real reality, even though the other person was in the negative zone. That's what this reminds me of. You're talking about two separate, distinct people. And we can argue whether that was great or worked or not or whatever. But completely different story, different character, different company, whatever. But the thing was Captain Marvel, and it's interesting, right? Because it's Captain Marvel and Rick Jones, and this is Captain Marvel and Billy Batson. Like, is Josie Campbell like? Is she homaging that? I mean, because it's Captain Marvel, like you're doing the same thing. I don't know, but anyway, the reason that was okay, and I wouldn't nitpick it as much as I would nitpick this, is because Captain Marvel, it was established he was his own character long before that plot came around. Same thing with Rick Jones, and then they happened to be together, and and the accident happened, and with the Negabands or whatever, and they became linked, and they would switch places like that. And now it's almost like Josie Campbell's doing the same sort of thing with the DC version of Captain Marvel and Billy Batson, where you were speculating on, can they be in the same place at the same time? How do they communicate? Mm-hmm. Like, it just seems, it's a fundamental change that I don't think was necessary, and it's confusing because, again, Captain Marvel's making these decisions and he's saying these things, and I got no context for. Nothing's been established for his personality. He's always been Billy Batson, the kid with the heart of gold, always wanted to do, what's right, super powerful, whatever, with a little bit of innocence or naivete. And that's not the case anymore because he's separate now. So I don't know what to think. Could this work? Yes, but I really think it's too soon to say. But you're right, as far as like the technical aspect of it. Is it well written? Yes. Is dialogue good? Yes. Is it well paced? Yes. Is the art fantastic? Yes. So it's kind of a wait and see thing.
But it makes you wonder: what about his other orphan brothers and sisters? When they change into the Marvel family, are all of them separate as well? Yeah. Or do we have separate? Like, I mean, it's confusing. It made more sense when Captain Marvel / Shazam was the best that Billy Batson would grow up to be. It was the maximum adult potential that you could become. There's sort of a thematic empowerment to the fact that Billy could become his best potential by turning into Shazam, and now it's sort of like, well, I guess it's just a separate entity. Now he's basically like Donald Blake / Thor. I mean, I guess that's fine. It's just, it really does throw a huge wrench into the mythology, and it might be for the better, but right now, to me, it just confuses me a little bit.
Yeah, it might be for the better, but I got to be honest. Like, this is not the direction I would take it, not the direction I want to see it head. But I'm not going to say that means it's not going to work.
That's right.
I haven't read the story, so I'll give it a chance. Give it the benefit of the doubt. But it seems like a really strange decision. So anyway, let's move on. We'll see how it plays out eventually. Up next, it's a reprint issue. It does have one new story. It's DC Pride, a celebration of Rachel Pollack, who died last year. Rachel Pollack was a trans creator who most well known for work on Doom Patrol. So there's a forward here by Stuart Moore, and then there's a reprint of Doom Patrol 70, The Laughing Game, that Rachel Pollack wrote. And then there's a reprint of Vertigo Visions, The Geek #1, Homelands of the Dolls, which Pollack also wrote. And then there's a new story by a close friend of Rachel's, Joe Carallo, who is the writer. Rye Hickman is the artist, and John Workman is letters. And that one's called Shining Through the Wreckage. So, interest of full disclosure, I am not a Doom Patrol fan. I mean, Rachel Pollack was the writer that followed Grant Morrison's weirdness on the Doom Patrol. And when I say I'm not a Doom Patrol fan, I'm not a fan of the Grant Morrison super out there weird version of Doom Patrol. It's not for me. I don't like it. I did read that Doom Patrol reprint and issue, and I thought it was okay. I tried to read The Geek, but I just couldn't. Again, not for me. Way too weird, way too out there. But agree that Rachel Pollack, it was a loss when she passed away. I think she was a good writer that added a lot to the fabric of the DC universe. So, anything to add about this anthology?
I will add. Rachel Pollack created the character of Kate Godwin, aka Coagula, and Joe Carallo's story, which is the only new story here. He did a pretty good job here, and in typical Doom Patrol fashion, he brings the character of Kate Godwin back and makes her a member of the Doom Patrol. And there's a reference in this story to Dennis Culver's Doom Patrol, so it's actually within continuity. And it brings Kate Godwin back by suggesting that because of a kind of a complicated Doom Patrol storyline, there was an aspect of Kate Godwin, Coagula's consciousness, still within Robot Man, and with the help of Dr. Magnus, they actually pull out the consciousness of Kate Godwin at the end, and now Kate can access different realities using computers, and because Robot Man, part of him is a computer, and of course he's got a computer brain. Because she was within his consciousness, with the help of Dr. Magnus, they were able to pull the Coagula character out, and she ends up becoming, at the end of this, a full-fledged member, I guess, of the Doom Patrol. So moving forward in future iterations of the Doom Patrol, I believe we could probably expect that Kate Godwin, who is a trans character, is otherwise known as Coagula, is going to be a member of the Doom Patrol. So that's a really nice tribute to Rachel Pollack, taking one of her central characters, a trans character, in this DC Pride compilation, and actually, as a way of sort of her living on in the context of future Doom Patrol stories. And my shout out to Joe Carallo. I thought it was a heartfelt story, and the art by Ry Hickman was different than was a little bit jarring. It was a little bit different than her first appearance in Doom Patrol number 70, but nonetheless, the theme of the story and the fact that she returned and it was somewhat heartfelt, I thought was pretty good. So definitely, if you're a fan of Rachel Pollack, but if you're a Doom Patrol fan just in and of itself, this is well worth picking up. You're on mute, my friend.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think if you're a fan of her run, you definitely want to pick this up. It'll be probably a fun walk down memory lane. So, okay, up next we have Batman number 148, written by Chip Zdarsky, art by Jorge Jimenez, colors by Tomeo More, letters by Clayton Cowles. The Storm is what it's titled, and it could this be the actual end? Could this be the end of this story, of this story arc from Chip Zdarsky? It seems like it's been going on forever. The whole Failsafe thing, and it's interesting because it doesn't say finale, it doesn't say final chapter or anything. It just says The Storm. So I guess next issue something completely different, new story arc. Like I wasn't prepared for this to end. It felt like it was going to go forever, to be honest with you. And I've been enjoying it well enough, but it doesn't blow me over, and it's not like Batman's at the top of my reading stack every week when it comes out. But I gotta say, and I think this is what you should strive for as a comic writer, when you give the final chapter of a story arc, especially one that's lasted as long as this, it should be the best story. It should be the best single issue of the arc. It should, that means you've nailed it. And for me, this was the best issue since Failsafe showed up. It was fantastic. Now, the whole idea of Capteo, he is a little bit of a plot device. Larry Sue, is that the term? Not a Mary
Gary Sue. Well, I call him Gary Sue, but Gary
Sue, yeah, because he does sort of hold his own physically against members of the Bat family, with kind of this. And if you're not, it's easy to miss it if you're not paying attention. He said, "Oh, if I unlock my mind, the mind controls the body. Of course, I'd be a fabulous fighter." That that kind of thing. That's intimated. So you kind of take that for what you will, but I think it does make sense. But again, it's like, really. We already have a Hugo Strange. I guess you couldn't tie him in based on who he is with the earliest iterations of Batman. So you come up with this new character, Capteo. So we haven't seen the last of him, I'm sure. But again, that's just a nitpick. Overall, this was fantastic. It was great to see. It was great to have an explanation for why Batman's Bruce Wayne has been such a jerk lately. Zdarsky just really wrapped everything up really, really nicely. The way they trick Failsafe, the way they trick Zur-En-Augh, like all of it just made sense. And again, it felt like this was going to go on for a long time. You think, well, for him to, tie it all up in this issue, it's going to feel rushed. It didn't at all. It didn't at all. It didn't feel rushed. It made sense. And so, yeah, I'm very curious to see where this goes next, because I don't really have a feel for what's going to happen with Zardasky's run. Because in a way, the entire Zardasky run has been sort of building to this arc the whole time. And now that this is done, like, where does it go from here? I guess we'll have to wait and see. So, yeah, I thought this was just really, really great, from the art, the colors, well paced by Zardasky. Yeah, like I said, this is what you strive for, right? Have your final issue of the series be the best issue of the run, or final issue of your arc be the best series of the arc. So, what do you think of it?
I thought the ending. I don't think the ending was quite as clever as I thought, as quite as clever as Zardasky intended. And the reason why, and I will fall upon my sword on this, but when Failsafe, I always assumed that Failsafe, frankly, had full intentions of killing Batman in the first arc. And the only reason Failsafe didn't was because Tim had injected Failsafe with empathy nanobites, which caused Failsafe at the last minute to, instead of killing Batman, sent him into another universe, another dimension. And however, maybe that's not the case. That must not be the case, because clearly Failsafe, because I always got the impression that Failsafe was out to kill Batman. Throughout the entire first Failsafe, Batman's life was at stake. Failsafe was going to kill Batman because Batman violated his code against killing. Failsafe was going to kill Batman and then take over and rule Gotham, or govern over Gotham. But apparently that's not the case. Apparently part of the programming is that Failsafe himself also could not kill. So that was a little bit of maybe clever misdirection on Zardasky's part. In any event, I thought it was kind of cool. I would also think that that's an astonishing, significant weakness on the part of the programming of Failsafe, but one that perhaps could have been inferred sooner, but I guess Bruce Wayne figured it out. But I like it. I like it because there was a little bit of misdirection, because I thought Failsafe was always a killer. To find out, know that actually he's not, and he can't be because he'd automatically shut down. Well, that's interesting. So this ends in a way that I found interesting. I also like the fact that this was an interesting sacrifice for Jason Todd, because Batman confided in the Batman family, in particular Jason Todd, and basically showed him the Lazarus resin, saying this is the plan, let him in on the plan. But Jason, God bless him, wouldn't let Batman be the one to sacrifice his life and then become revived by Lazarus resin. But Jason allowed himself to be killed again. I guess because he's more familiar with getting beat to death than Bruce Wayne is. And so it was actually an interesting sacrifice. There was lots of good scenes here. Dr. Caprio battling against Jason Todd, battle between Damian and Tim and the clone. Zur's Robin is actually a clone of Bruce Wayne. A lot of very interesting revelations here. We saw Commissioner Savage as well. Commissioner Vandal Savage calling Amanda Waller, the U.S. military, to help out because of what Failsafe was doing. We know that even though at the end of this issue, Failsafe is incapacitated, it's fair to say, because Amanda Waller's on the scene with the U.S. military, she probably confiscates what's left of Failsafe and probably utilizes Failsafe, and probably will somehow have Failsafe under her control in absolute power. So there's some things that we can infer, those of us who are looking forward to absolute power. So overall, I thought this was really good. It made me sort of question some of the plot points, as I said, but I think overall it did work for me. And I particularly like what happened to the Riddler. They basically give Dr. Caprio gave Riddler and Failsafe gave Riddler what they call a personality transplant. What exactly does that mean? What is that going to mean for Riddler moving forward? Because they implied that Riddler may not necessarily have that shut-off valve in his head that prevents him from utilizing his full intelligence potential. How is the Riddler going to be different now? Is he going to be far more deadly, more akin to the Riddler we saw in Batman One Bad Day by Tom King? We shall see. That's just me speculating. But overall, I mean, there's so much crammed in this final issue. But I agree with you. I liked it. There's a lot of potential here for storylines going forward. I hope Zardasky does something with it. I think is Zardasky, is this his last, is he staying on this title, or is someone else going to be writing it? Do you know?
As far as I know, I mean, the next issue has been solicited as a epilogue. So tying
Yeah.
up whatever loose ends. And then after that, you've got the big 150 issue, and Zdarsky's still writing that oversized milestone, 150. And then 151, you figure, okay, well, that's going to start a new storyline. Batman and Catwoman versus Suicide Squad, and Zdarsky's still on that. It's got a fantastic cover with Bizarro on it, who looks like he has some kind of a mechanical arm. And Catwoman's on there as well. That's the last issue that's been solicited. So as far as I know, I mean, I haven't heard anything about him leaving the title, so he's on it for the foreseeable future, as far as I know.
Right on.
All right, up next we have Birds of Prey number 10. This is from writer Kelly Thompson. Robbie Rodriguez and Gavin Goodry are the artists. Jordi Belair on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. Give us your thoughts on this one, Worlds Without End, part 2 of 5.
Well, I wasn't a big fan of the last issue. I thought the last issue, I thought it was a wasted issue. I thought I was disappointed in both. I just thought the art was kind of meh, and I thought it was sort of a wasted issue plot wise, because they just the Birds of Prey just sort of meandered in one dimension before moving on to this one, where they enter into this one here. And I have to say, a lot happens in this issue, so much so that I wish it would have. I wish the substance of story and plot that we got in this issue was spread out and started last issue, because I really think last issue was a wasted issue. But this issue, unfortunately, the art is, in my view, Robbie Rodriguez joins Gavin Goodry on the art, and I think it suffers, quite frankly. I think that Jordi Belair's colors, which she's had a muted color palette from the beginning on this, but we've had there's the artistically. I mean, Leonardo Romero was the one whose art started off the series, and I wish they would have stuck with him throughout the series instead of him just being relegated to covers, or maybe he's just not fast enough. But story-wise, we get far more substance here. We get apparently as there essentially there's this creature which we end up this creature is chasing the Birds of Prey through various dimensions, and every time it's revealed here, the Birds of Prey end up running into a new character. I believe it's a new character called Sela. Her name is Sela Solano Lockhart. She's one of 7 sisters, and all of her sisters are dead except for her oldest sister, Maya, who is actually this shadow creature that's going around with the goal of wanting to kill all the Birds of Prey, and in particular Barbara Gordon, because the mother of these 7 sisters, named after the constellation in the sky, the mother of these 7 sisters is apparently at some time in the future killed by the Birds of Prey, specifically Barbara Gordon. So that brings us back to the original reason why this series began in the first place, and that or this particular story arc began in the first place, because Barbara Gordon they want to prevent Barbara Gordon from being killed. And in this case, the person that's going to kill Barbara Gordon is supposedly going to be this Maya character, who's the firstborn of these 7 sisters, and the good person, the good sister, Seleno, or Sela is her name, who's got a pet shapeshifter called Poe, is one of the last surviving sisters, and she's trying to protect the Birds of Prey from her sister. And we get a lot of story here. We get some background on the sisters. These sisters were born in our dimension, and then their mother was killed, and they fled into the wardrobe, which was a dimension that they created because they got dimension creating abilities. And meanwhile, Barbara Gordon is trapped in a different dimension yet, and every dimension they go to, every world gets reskinned. So it's a new term that Kelly Thompson has created. Every time the Birds of Prey enter a new dimension, whatever the first Bird of Prey is thinking that enters the dimension that the world becomes reskinned according to how they're thinking. And in this case, this issue, the central conceit and the ongoing little bit of a joke in the background is Big Barda thinks of the 1950s, and that explains some of the wardrobe. I wish creatively, I wish the wardrobe, I wish the art was better. I don't think that there was a particularly good job done on the art in terms of the wardrobe. It didn't really remind me much of the 1950s as much as it ought to have, in my view. But Barbara, Cassandra Cain maybe had sort of like a 1950s Catwoman flair to it. Vixen looked more like the maybe 50s style, but the rest really didn't to me. Big Barda ends up becoming infected by an aspect or a portion of this Maya shadow character, and it like I say, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I just thought I wish this. I'm interested. I'm curious. But at the same time, there's something that feels a little bit like something's missing here. The plot's a little bit wonky. I don't know Kelly Thompson. She introduces the Vixen is trying to sense the red, because this character, this Maya character, is the one that for whatever reason she stole Map's time traveling technology and tried to connect to the green, failed to connect to the green, instead connected to the red. That may have corrupted her, and now she's trying to find the birds of prey to kill them and kill Barbara Gordon. I wish artistically that this had. I think that there's so much more potential that the series would have if it had better artists, or at least more time was taken to put. Because this is about a connection to the red and the green. The red and the green is all of nature, and the red is all the rot. And we get no semblance, even artistically, any visuals of that whatsoever yet. And we should. But we're not getting that. And it just feels, there's a part of this that I find unsatisfying. Now, maybe this story is going to pick up, but it feels like it's sort of like meandering. There's even a scene where that didn't make much sense to me with Cassandra Cain. I didn't quite buy it. Big Barda is possessed by this Maya, and all Cassandra Cain has to do is have a conversation and tell Big Barda, basically talked Big Barda out of it to resist, and somehow Cassandra Cain thought that would work, and it did. I just didn't buy it. Why would she think that would work? I would have. I don't know. It just I'm nitpicking here maybe, but it just. This thing is just sort of like going, it doesn't quite feel right. Something's off with this series. It's been this way for this is now the third issue in a row where I've sort of like, something's not quite jiving. But at the heart and soul of this, though, is I do like the rapport between this team. They're getting to know each other. I'm sticking with it. But I just wish it had a different art team, a more consistent artist, one artist, and this is a title that should have just frankly better artists on it. I would love if a Daniel Sampere was on this title, frankly, instead of Wonder Woman, for a host of reasons which I won't go into. But I just it is what it is. But I love the cover. The cover is fantastic. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had every page with the same cover artist who started this series off and whose beautiful art is on the cover here? But in any event, what do you think of this?
I sort of agree with you. Something feels off or whatever. It's 100% the art. It's 100% the art. It's been the art for me since issue 1. I haven't been a big fan of the style of art they chose for this, and also the colors. And I've talked about the color work before. And I don't think it's Jordie Bellaire. She's one of the best colorists in working in comics in the last 20 years. Mm. So I'm not laying the blame at her feet. I'm saying that she sort of is not pigeonholed. That's not the right word, but the style of art, the style of line work that's done, it sort of has to be colored in these more pastel colors, these muted, faded, however you want to put it, colors. They're not traditional primary comic book colors, which I always talk about. When you have primary colors that are bright and vibrant, it really helps lend to the super heroic feel of the story. It feels very super hero comic. It feels very classic. That's what this needs. Like, I think back to like some of the first Birds of Prey comics, right? Like the first Birds of Prey special cover, it was Gary Frank, right? Like, oh my God, what if Gary Frank was drawing this? And it's not the same. Gary Frank doesn't even have the same style now as he did back then. His stuff now is a little more gritty, a little more textured. But I think back to like the really clean Gary Frank of those first Birds of Prey issues, or when he was first on the Hulk. Like, oh my God, that would be so good. I wouldn't go so far as to say I want to take Daniel Sampere off Wonder Woman. No, Daniel Sampere is killing it on Wonder Woman. I want him to stay on Wonder Woman. Maybe if we could clone Daniel, or just, give me somebody else on this who is just more in the traditional DC house style. Give me, I don't know, Serge Acuna. Give me Miguel Mendoza. I think any of those guys would do a fantastic job on this. Because for me, the part that's off, it's 100% the art. The story itself is interesting, but I just think the art doesn't do it any favors. I'm having to work harder to understand what's going on and to understand the story because of the tone that the art is providing. The tone, it feels sort of tired. It feels sort of old, and it feels sort of run down. And part of that is the line work. Part of it is the colors. But again, the line work is informing the colors. It just feels like this is a story where it doesn't have a lot of action and doesn't have a lot of momentum when I'm looking at the art and I'm looking at the colors. But when you actually stop and read what's happening in the story, no, there's a lot of action. There's a lot of danger. There's a lot of immediacy and sense of urgency for the Birds of Prey to figure out what's going on or what have you. And I just, again, we praise the art when it really elevates the story. We talk about how much it's 50-50 with writing and art in a medium where it's not like that in any other art form. And so unfortunately, when it doesn't work, this is what you get, where you're like, I don't know if the story's working, because the story narratively is so dependent on the storytelling in the art. And that's probably the strongest aspect of this art visually. Like the storytelling, the transitions from panel to panel, those are all fine. It's the aesthetic, it's the style of line work, it's the style of art, which again informs the color work, that just ends up making this feel kind of old and tired and slow. When if you set it aside and we're just to, go panel by panel describing the action to somebody who can't see it, and reading them the dialogue, it would feel like a fast-paced, action-packed story. But unfortunately, it's not what we get, and it's because of the art. So, but again, I've felt like that since the beginning of this series, when we had the Leandro art, who, again, I'm not saying these are not talented artists. I've read, I can't remember his first name, I apologize, but we've had art, and I've read stories from him before that I thought really worked. But they weren't. I don't think they were like traditional superhero stories, or if they were, not in this same style that this is. So, again, I'm not calling anybody out per se, because I do think, look, Kelly Thompson got more Eisner nominations than anybody else at the Eisners this year. She clearly is talented. You're telling me that all of a sudden she forgot how to write? No, that's not the case. It's just, again, the Leandro Romero, that's his name. I just don't think he was the right artist from jump. He just wasn't. And it's kind of set this tone and this precedent for the way the art was going to look. And now if he's no longer on the book, if he's moved on to other things or whatever, it happens. But I think there's a tendency for editors, well, let's get somebody whose art style is similar. Well, I don't think his art worked to begin with. So go in a completely different direction. I know DC has any number of artists out there. Maybe they're all working on Absolute Power stuff. I don't know. But for me, the failure of this title from the beginning has been the art. I'm a huge Kelly Thompson fan, and I have complete faith in her ability to tell a fantastic story. And it's just too bad. And I like the Birds of Prey too. But for me, the art-wise, visually, this series hasn't worked from the beginning. And unfortunately, the art has gotten, it's gone the wrong direction. The art from the beginning, I think, wasn't a good fit for the story. And now the gap between the style of art and the story is even wider now than it was when it first started.
And I would just clarify that I like the art. I like Romero's art from the beginning, but he hasn't stayed on the title. So it's because we've gotten inconsistent art. But if you're like me and you've liked the art from the beginning, I haven't been getting the same art from the beginning. And so you've never been a big fan of the art from the beginning, period. But even a guy like me who was, I'm not even getting that, and that's the frustration artistically. So
yeah, he did. Issues 1 through 4, then they had a fill-in artist on 5, and then he did 6, and then we've had a different artist on every issue since issue 6. Robbie Rodriguez, Jonathan Case, David Lopez, Javier Pina. We haven't had the same artist 2 issues in a row since Romero last did issue 6. Well, and he did the first 4, then he had a fill-in. So basically the first 4 had the same, and then since issue 5, there's been a different artist on every issue. Different artists on 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Every single issue has had a different. So 4 issues with the same artist and then 6 issues in a row with a different artist. That's a problem.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, well, anyway, moving on to the last book we're going to talk about in detail, Poison Ivy number 23, from writer G. Willow Wilson, art by Hanning, colors by Arif Prianto, letters by Hassan Otsman Elhau. I don't have a lot to say about this issue. It felt like it sort of could have been wrapped up last issue with, basically Poison Ivy going, I know what I have to do. I have to basically kill Jason Woodrow once and for all. And she's going to sacrifice to do so. And then in this issue, not a lot actually happens. Like Harley shows up, Jason Todd shows up. I can't remember his name, but the guy with the big flower head that was a urban developer at one point, and Ivy met him, a few issues ago and got rescued by Killer Croc. I can't remember what the guy's name was, but anyway, he shows up and ultimately is able to separate Ivy from Woodrow, so supposedly she won't have to sacrifice herself. But this just felt really decompressed and really dragged out to me. And then this issue ends with Poison Ivy apparently dying, which I thought she was dying at the, maybe we'll say she's dead. So she was dying at the cliffhanger of last page of last issue, and now she's dead here in Poison Ivy's arms, I guess. So spent a whole issue of her just dying and everybody trying to save her, what have you. But nothing is really like kind of fleshed out or explained, other than somehow Ivy is tied to Woodrow, and she wants to rid the world of him, and that means she herself is going to die as well because they're linked. And everybody else is just fighting to save her. And really, I think you can do that in 2 pages. Instead, we got this giant issue with art that's okay. It's not my favorite style, really sort of messy. And at the end of the day, now we're going to have to sort of do what I thought we were going to do in this issue, which was deal with Poison Ivy's death or bring her back from the brink of death. We're going to do that next issue, apparently. So I just question the pacing. I think it could have gone a little quicker. But, for the most part, I've been enjoying G. Willow Wilson's Poison Ivy run. So, I'll give her a pass for dragging this out a little bit, I guess. I don't know. I just thought, again, it could have just gone quicker. But maybe she's trying to really let it sink in. Maybe she wanted a chance to write some Jason Todd and some Harley Quinn. I don't know. But yeah, we'll see. One of the things that was maybe the most consequential, but could easily be missed in this issue, is apparently the reason Jason Todd shows up is because Batman has created an antidote for the Lamia spores, which we know were infecting the water supply of Gotham City. So it's been disseminated out to the water supply. So hopefully the citizens of Gotham that were infected and are like these Lamia zombies, if you will, in this issue, the ones that aren't smashed with Harley's hammer can be cured, and anybody in the city who's still infected can be cured, and perhaps Poison Ivy herself can be cured if she is not actually dead in the arms of Harley Quinn at the end of this issue. So, yeah, this has been an interesting series. It's definitely exceeded my expectations, but for me, this is probably one of my least favorite issues of the series so far. It's because it just felt unnecessary. So I don't know. What do you think, Rocky?
Well, I think this was one of the more necessary issues. It just took a long time to get here because I think we finally have some resolutions. I'm glad that Jason Todd showed up, Harley showed up, Janet at HR. We're actually having something actually of substance a little bit happen as opposed to things sort of like dragging out. But frankly, I started off sounding negative there, but let me give a compliment to this series. One of the reasons I think why this series, despite being very decompressed in parts, it's had very consistent interior art and good art. I'll even say that even the covers, because I mean, I've collected every issue. The covers have been consistently drawn as well. There's consistently art-wise on this, and it's been a pretty good origin story. It's been dragged out, but there's one thing that has worked is that we're going to be hitting. This is the 23rd issue of Poison Ivy. Next issue will be likely the final story of this arc. Poison Ivy's not dead. I mean, how many times has Poison Ivy died since issue 1? I mean, give me a break. It's ridiculous already. But I mean, the reality is that we definitely got to know a different Poison Ivy. We got a revamped, a rebirthed almost Poison Ivy, which I thought was interesting, and I like the fact that, I mean, I still think she has potential to be evil. So there's a little bit of but the Poison Ivy's at a different part of their life now, and she's got to revitalize kind of arguably a more interesting origin. And, and even Janet from HR is interesting. I love the fact that this, Teenie Howard, take notice, this Harley Quinn shows up. Teenie Howard probably doesn't recognize this character called Harley Quinn because she's writing a different character in her comic. But, this is actually the Harley that a little bit closer to the Harley that I like. Harley, of course, is going to show up and try to rescue her lover, Poison Ivy. There was I thought it was a funny scene here where Janet from HR hinted to Harley that she had basically been with both her and Poison Ivy, and Harley said, "What? What are you talking about?" Never mind. So I thought I like that because there's some interesting moments here. And I think at the end of the day, I have been enjoying this series despite its decompression because at least at the end of 24 issues, we can legitimately say Poison Ivy is at a different spot in her life than she was from issue 1. She has changed. There's been an actual change. I had to endure 100 issues of Joshua Williamson's Flash, and Wally West was identical from issue 1 to issue 100. I mean, it was just, there was no change. At least here, there's actual, Poison Ivy is actually a different character. We got some character development. We got evolution. We got some genuinely heartfelt moments. She was both a terrorist and she was also sympathetic. She was also, she went through the gambit of emotions. I can be a little bit critical and suggest that we came all this time only to have Batman save the day. Really? I guess you still need Batman to save the day. Okay, that's fine. I was surprised that J. Willow Wilson did that she needs the help of Batman to actually technically save everyone. It's not Poison Ivy, it's not Harley, it's not the center characters themselves. But at the same time, that shows that Poison Ivy, at the end of the day, she still ultimately is a villain at heart and hangs out with villains, point blank, and she's still not quite capable of saving the world, is she? She still needs Batman to do that, so she's still not perfect. And that's not a criticism. That's kind of a good thing. It says to me that, well, you know what? She failed, basically. She's going to live, she's going to survive, and she may have saved her friends ultimately, but she's still not, she still has that dark side with her. She still has her flaws, and that's what I like. And it's still arguably you can say that Poison Ivy, Pamela Isley is still a character that can go either way, full bore evil, a full bore a little bit more anti-hero. So, but again, it's we're still not done this story, but at least one more issue, and then we'll be done the fourth story arc. And I think I don't know. I would think this series would wrap up, but this has been a relatively successful series. So kudos to J. Willow Wilson. She seems to have captivated her own niche of an audience.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the resolution wasn't needed. I'm just saying I think you could have got this. You could have the last page of this issue could have been in the last page of the last issue. I just think this, or you could have the necessary parts of this issue could have been in the next one dealing with the death of Poison Ivy. Also, you said a couple other things there. A character that could go both ways. Well, that's something that a statement that could go in multiple ways. I'll see that first of all. Second of all, you mentioned the dark side of her, and it got me thinking, dark side? Her teaming up with dark side. Well, that might be interesting as well. So anyway, as I said, everybody, that's the last of the books that we're going to talk about in detail today. We do have some other singles coming out. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Number 128, as well as the Batman and Scooby-Doo Mysteries Season 3, issue number 6. Those are both out today, as is the first issue of Batman, Robin, and Howard Summer Break. Summer Break Out. The first issue of that is out as well. And then as far as collections this week, we've got the Wonder Woman Volume 1 Outlaw trade paperback. There's 2 different versions. There's a special direct version that has a Stanley Art Germ variant cover. So you got 2 different covers to choose from there. Also, All-Star Superman is getting the compact treatment, which is this new format that DC is trying out that are a little bit smaller. Kind of reminds me of the way manga is sold, almost in a digest format, a little bit bigger than digest. But those are out today. There's also a compact version of Far Sector, which is the Joe Mullen story. And then Red Hood Outlaws Volume 2 trade paperback. So this is the team with Artemis and Bizarro and Red Hood. But this is the webtoon, collecting the webtoon version of Red Hood and Outlaws. So this is Volume 2, like I said. So it collects issues or episodes, I should say, 12 through 22 of the series. And then Vixen, that has the webtoon as well, has its Volume 6, which is collecting episodes 47 through 52 of the webtoon. So obviously these things are doing really well on webtoon because we're up to 52 episodes. That's a year worth of episodes for Vixen. And let's be honest, Vixen's not the most popular or well-known DC character. So there's also a JSA, the Golden Age trade paperback. This collects the Golden Age series from James Robinson with art by Paul Smith. Paul Smith being a veteran penciler, mostly known or most well known for his X-Men work with Chris Claremont back in the day. So that's a great series. I encourage you to check that out if you're so inclined. So that's going to do it, everybody, for the DC coverage. Time for our book of the week. Rocky, what do you got?
Man. Oops. Let me see here. My pick of the week. Let me see. Overall, I was underwhelmed this week. So it was actually, there was only one candidate for me, if I'm really being honest. And I'd have to go with Batman. I have to go with Batman 148. Because it was a nice wrap up to the Failsafe storyline. I thought it was it made me think. I think Zardasky does a good job sort of wrapping everything up and teasing some future storylines that'll come out. So I thought it was pretty good. What about yourself?
Yeah, two that were a candidate for me this week. One of them being the aforementioned Batman. But since you picked that, I'll go with my other one. Kneel Before Zod, number 6. Really like the idea of Emerald Empress showing up. How she's gonna either be an adversary of Zod or perhaps an ally of Zod. Really interesting. This whole idea of Zod being returned to his classic villainous form and has been an incredible job by Joe Casey. And I ran into him. I think I mentioned on the podcast, I ran into him at WonderCon earlier this year and mentioned how much we've been enjoying the Zod series. And now I hope I run into him in San Diego so I can really gush over it because, man, it has just been so good. Breath of fresh air. So, so that's going to be my pick. All right, everybody. One other thing I'll mention about the DC books this week, a lot of them are going to have a preview for Gotham by Gaslight, the Kryptonian Age, which is one of the new Elseworlds series. It's coming out really soon, actually. I think the first issue is out next week, as a matter of fact, or maybe the following week. But yeah, DC returning to the classic Elseworlds idea of stories. Stories are, out of continuity, which is sort of what Black Label is. So I think there's some nostalgia for the Elseworld term. But anyway, the reason I bring it up, again, there are previews in a lot of this week's books, but also I'm going to be talking with Andy Diggle and the artist. I can't remember the artist's name. Matt, I think it might be Matt Leandro, who's the artist. So I'm going to be talking to them later this week. I think I'm talking to them on Thursday. So hopefully, I'll have the episode out on Friday for you guys to listen to. So you have a chance to find out a little bit more about what Gotham by Gaslight, the Kryptonian Age, is all about. Leandro Fernandez actually is the artist. So again, look for that later this week. So that's going to do it for this episode. Any last thoughts, Rocky?
No, just everybody enjoy the week, enjoy this beginning of summer. At least we got great weather here in southern Alberta. Might even probably doesn't give Phoenix a run for its money, but the weather was fantastic this past weekend. So yeah, and I get to barbecue a steak now.
Yeah, might be my turn to come for a visit up there instead of the other way around.
So you're more than welcome.
Yeah, excessive heat warnings for a lot of the Western U.S. this week. So anyway, that's going to do it. Stay cool out there, everybody. We appreciate the support as always. Don't forget, if you're listening to the audio-only version, to head over to YouTube, to Rocky's channel, where you can see all the graphics and art for all these books that we talk about. Comic Space Boom! Is a channel. Once you're there, you know what to do. Ring the notification bell, subscribe, leave some comments. We really like to engage. And of course, you don't want to miss out when anything new comes out. So if you're subscribed, if you ring that notification bell, you'll be covered. Conversely, if you're checking us out on YouTube and you're curious about the other Comic Source content, certainly go and subscribe to the Comic Source on YouTube as well, where we put up all our interviews and reviews and what have you. But also, we've got more than 2,500 past audio-only episodes on our podcast feed. So just go to whatever app or podcast platform you use, do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. We really appreciate the support, everybody. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.